speaking about climate change.
Okay, so a fair few areas covered as well then.
Yes, but the interesting thing is at the start of it they actually told everybody that was there for this topic that they weren't there to talk about emissions trading schemes and carbon targets, which I thought was quite interesting because obviously they're two of the biggest things that people are talking about as solutions to climate change, but they said that they didn't want to discuss that because that was already being discussed under Kyoto. So the idea was to try and discuss other areas such as public transport infrastructure.
I suppose that's fair enough. So it wasn't just a government being lazy and not wanting to have to come up with their own platforms?
Maybe. That's one way of seeing it, I guess. I don't know, I think that was quite a good idea because they had these 100 people in this room for this one time who were experts on this area, and I think it was good that they didn't waste time on something that was already being discussed at a government level.
Yeah, no, it kind of makes sense now that you've explained it to me, Sarah.
Yeah.
So then I was like,
that's what I'm here for, Jason.
Let's not talk about carbon. It doesn't make sense. So what were some of the ideas that came out within this topic?
Okay, they've got a plan to make all buildings carbon neutral by 2020. They've got a plan to establish a national education centre which will be based on Indigenous knowledge. What they want to do is collect knowledge from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders and look at how they can use their wisdom of the land and the climate and nature and how we can take that wisdom and help us adapt to the consequences of climate change. One of the other plans was a national sustainability, population and climate change agenda, which will actually be processed by institutions that will be set up to forward that agenda, and they've also got a federal government-led national cities program to focus on saving water, using energy more wisely and encouraging people to switch to public transport.
So do you think these will really have a serious effect or a change on or impact on climate change?
I think they will if they all go ahead, but personally I think we need to do a lot more than this by 2020. I think these things could be achievable by, say, 2014.
Really?
They had a discussion with the Premier of South Australia, Mike Rann, who's been doing a lot on renewable energy, and he'd set a plan for their state to have 20% renewable energy by 2014, and they're going to meet that next year. So I think that's a great example of if we do set these targets at a later date, then I think we should try and focus on achieving them earlier so we can move on to then bigger and
Can I
better
put my
things.
hand up as being someone who reckons that Western Australia should have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of solar cells and fans, those big what do they call those things?
Wind turbines.
Wind turbines, there we go. I need to be a technical term for it. I like to call them woodwoods. But look, it's working all around the world, and even down south, they've got them down Denmark, in Albany, and they've got a couple up in Shark Bay. Why aren't they everywhere?
Look, I don't really know, and one of the other controversial things that came out of this topic was a lot of the members in the room on this topic wanted to vote that we ban opening any more coal-powered power stations by 2020, and it was basically ignored. They said that that was not the time and the place to talk about it. They had a lot of people in the room stand up and say that they thought this was the number one thing that Australians really could do. This should be the top idea at 2020. And
so just to summarise that point though, Sarah, so if there's going to be a new power station built, it must be sustainable. But
basically, yeah.
What concerns me though about that argument about giving it a timeline, saying, okay, well after 2020 there'll be no more coal-fired stations, that if I was the energy guy who didn't care about the environment and just wanted to make more power plants, I'd just build as many as I could between now and 2020.
I guess that is, yeah, I mean that perhaps is one argument. Maybe that's why it wasn't discussed.
So when will these ideas start to get put into action then?
Well, hopefully soon. Apparently Kevin Rudd has decided, or he's actually said that he will look at all of the ideas in depth before the end of the year. Obviously they've got until 2020 to get them implemented, but I think probably over the next 3 years we'll see at least half of the ideas seriously.
Now let's just
beginning.
Yeah, look into reality. Just quickly before we go, what are the consequences if this doesn't happen, if these ideas don't go through, or if people don't start making little changes around their homes?
I think that, you know, the effects of climate change are getting worse and worse every day really, and one of the scientists that was at the 2020 summit, Dr. Graham Pearman, one of the points that he made was that all of the climate change models that we've had, all of the climate change predictions that we've had, none of them have been on the high side. In other words, all of them have underestimated the effects that we are having on the planet, and that's a pretty scary statement when you think about that. So I think these things really need to be pushed through if we're going to have a serious chance at adapting to what's ahead of us.
Sarah Bishop, we're going to have to leave it there, mate.
Okay.
I did want to get on if there's any other topics that actually touched on climate change, which I imagine there will be a few. Maybe we can cover that next week.
I'm sure we can.
We're going to Sarah Bishop, keeping them honest, so I won't say the full. So this is our eco reporter, and we'll see Sarah again next week. But 2020 summit, if you have any input there, you'd like to ask Sarah Bishop some specific questions about what happened at the 2020 summit and what's the implications are for climate change and long-term sustainability of our environment, wakeupwa.com.au, drop her a line and we'll put you in touch. Sarah, thank you so much once again. Always a pleasure to have you in. We need to go to a break. When we come back, Matt Hearn will be with Anita talking about debt.